Hey Jennifer, how you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I know we're all getting ready for the big rally tomorrow here in Midland over at the
Yes,
courthouse.
very, very busy.
Yeah, for sure. I think you mentioned today that you were out uh like putting flyers up on windows and things like that around town.
Yeah, yeah. In the midst of trying to get the birthday presents for the twins for tonight.
Right. Life
Because I'm a good
life
parent. I
still
didn't put this off.
life still goes on. Well, I know that we were thinking today we could, talk about the whole idea of protesting and planning like a big rally and what goes into that. Because it's a lot and it's not just you and me, of course, like doing a ton of
Hmm.
work to pull something like this off. I wonder if you could share your thoughts about just like first like the purpose of a rally and a protest, and like what the heck good it even does.
Yeah. And yeah, and you and I both know, like we've had so many conversations about this recently. Um, just thinking about, okay, it seems like there's a protest every week right now, sometimes multiple protests a week, and there's
Yep.
nothing wrong with that. But we get a lot of, as leaders, we get, well, are we going to do this one? Are we going to do this one? Are we going
Yep.
to do this one? So there's a whole thought process as people that plan protests that one, are why would we want to do this particular one? So you have to look at the issues behind it. You have to look and see, okay, well, we did one last week. Are we even going to get people to show up in this, this town of 40,000
Yeah.
people for
Yeah.
another one the following week? And then, how far away is it? Is it in our town? Is it something, further away? How far away do we want to go? And then like also, we've conversations we've had about like, do we have one here when we know there's one in Lansing or there's one in Ann Arbor,
Detroit.
or do
Yeah.
we go to that one
Yeah.
to make that one bigger and more
Right.
obvious and get better press for it? So there's all sorts of things that we go into.
Yeah.
And then one thing, that we've definitely talked about, and I think we had a conversation with some people last night about this, is kind of, well, is that even effective? And I guess
Yes.
it really depends on how you define effective. Is
Yeah.
that protest going to change the mind of the people in power in that minute? Probably not.
Yeah.
And if we're dealing with Trump and MAGA, is that going to really change how they think at all? I don't think ever. I don't think our protests have any actual effect on how they think, but you can get more people involved. You can galvanize more support. You can give people hope. And you know what? There have been protests that it may not have changed how Trump thought or other politicians thought, but they changed what they were doing
Mm-hmm.
because of the protest.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think the original Muslim travel ban is a good example of that
Mm-hmm.
during the first Trump administration. Yeah, I mean, I've been getting very spicy with people
Me
lately,
too.
which I'm sure you've noticed, with people who say like, "What's that thing worth?" and like that little thing isn't organized enough for me, and there's this whole like perception that like if one way of resisting is not going to solve everything, then we might as well just like throw in the towel and do
Yeah.
nothing, when it's just like incremental acts,
Yeah.
over and over again, large and small. um don't give up any ground at all. Just use everyone's gifts and talents all the time. Then that's how we're not only gonna like get through this time, but it's also how we're gonna like move the needle. And like I keep thinking about, the conversation that you and I have been in right around like Midland and moving the ground in Midland, and Midland going from a very conservative city to a city that consistently votes Democrat now in the
Mm-hmm.
course of just 10 years. And like that work that we did was from incremental gains, sort of thing after thing, and offering all these ways for people to plug into like the civic like discourse in all sorts of ways. And one of those ways is a protest and a rally. And it also harkens back to the traditions of the founding of our country. And it's a thing that
Mhm.
we get to do that feels very, very patriotic to me every time I get to do
Yeah.
that. And there's like, there's value in that too. There's value in that too.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would even say, I mean, like, look at, like, we've talked, there's a whole lot of protests going on. Everywhere you turn around, there's another protest these days. Some big, some small. And for those of you that live around here in Midland, you're going to have a reference for this. But if anybody's watching this that is not from the Mid-Michigan area, there's a small town north of us called Clare. And it's very rural, and it's very Republican. And they just had a protest where 150 people showed up on a street
Amazing.
corner with
Yeah.
24 hours notice.
Yeah.
Do you know what that does for the Democrats or independents or anybody that's, thinks no matter what their political leaning is, they're like, Trump is not a good president. The direction of this country is not good. I do not like this. To see 150 people in a small
Yeah.
town on
Yeah.
the main street corners, and they have like a crossroads that's actually kind of I don't want to say main thoroughfare, but it's you go through it on your way to go to other places, kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like it's a big deal. It really helps people feel not alone.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's not the only thing, but it's a thing that is an
Yeah,
important,
a big
tool
visible thing.
to keep mindful of. And
Yeah.
we know very well the power of people finding each other, right? So I
Mhm.
think about, and I just got a little bit of chills when you were talking about Claire, because I think about those people driving through that town, seeing all those people and thinking, man, I have thought I was the only Democrat in Claire for my whole life.
Yeah.
And look at, there's 150 people on the street corner. And like that kind of thing builds the community and builds the courage for the next thing. So,
Yeah.
again, it's not the only thing. And I think there is a danger of protest fatigue, of course.
Mhm.
And we have to be mindful of that. Like I know you've noticed I don't show up at all the protests like I
Mhm.
used to. I show up that the ones that I, have that I want to, that I'm really connected to.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important thing to think about when in terms of just like pacing and self-care
Yeah.
during this time. So,
And I
yeah,
wanted to share something that a fellow organizer in Flint shared with me the other day, because we've been, they're planning a protest the same day that we're planning a protest. So
yeah,
we've been like sharing stuff. But she sent me something that said 3.5% of the population. I'm trying to, let me read it. No democracy movement has ever failed when it was able to mobilize at least 3.5% of the population to protest over a sustained period. That's, I mean, it's still a lot of people, but if you think about that spread across this entire country, 3.5% of our country, I mean, that's like 11 million people or something. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but
yeah,
I think that's already happening. We just
yeah,
have to maintain it.
yeah. I'm trying to do the calculation of 3.5% of 40,000 people in Midland.
Yeah.
Um, and that's only 1,400 people. That's only 1,400 people
Yeah.
that need to be mobilized in that way. So
Hmm.
just like think about that across the country. And so,
Hmm.
um, I don't know. I think as leaders, it's in community leaders in this space, and we're not the only community leaders in this space,
No.
of course, either, but we have great and amazing collaborations and partnerships with other folks in our area. Um, but we sit in the middle of this tension between this idea of like we got to be organized in as big as possible for every single potential protest, plus all the other ones we might want to do, and like the other side, which is saying like, why the heck are we even doing protests at all? They don't matter
Hmm.
at all, right? And like
Yeah.
we're sitting in that place of like
Hmm.
trying to balance those two ideas in a way that's the most effective.
Yeah.
But tell me about the planning, right? So like let's talk about that, right? So like what is your like what is your when you're thinking about a protest and thinking about kind of doing the collaboration stuff, what is the first, second, and third thing that kind of comes to your mind about kind of making the decision to do it and then moving forward?
Yeah, so I mean, it's usually, I mean, at least here in this community, every community is going to be different. But the first thing is either I say, or someone on the Midland Dems board says we need to do a protest, or somebody from the Women of Michigan
That's it.
Action Network says they want to do a protest.
Yeah.
And so the first thing, whether it's that side or this side, or we're also intertwined anyway. I mean, you and I are both Dems and Women of Michigan Action
Right.
Network. But it's like, okay, let's get together, let's collaborate, let's plan this together because it's so much easier for us to do it, spread the work around. So that's always the first thing. But then it's like, where and what kind? Are we talking, let's just get 100 people to stand on a street corner and hold signs? Or do we think we want to actually have a march where we're stopping traffic? Or is it, kind of a rally? And our typical place for that is the Midland County Courthouse steps, because it kind of creates a little bit of a stage, and it's a municipality location that means something.
Symbolic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I think that the other thing that I think about in terms of just getting started is like, um, do we have this idea independently, locally, that we want to
Mm-hmm.
like target our, you know, John Molinar and like his decision
Yeah.
about whatever, right? Or is the idea stemming from a more like nationalized movement or statewide movement
Mm-hmm.
in a way that like connects and coordinates with, similar actions going on maybe across the country. A lot of the beautiful thing is a lot of our rallies lately have been the latter, have been like,
Mm-hmm.
this group is doing, like protests across the country, and this one, this is National Women's Day is tomorrow. So like National Women's Day, like all these groups are going across, doing this across the country. And that amount of collaboration is way different than it was in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And 2017, I guess. And the beauty of that just is really in the strength that we have developed in the years since, right? So like we used to do a lot locally, just local action.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much like there was the Women's March group and that was really it. Like there was not a whole lot of other like avenues to plug into. And it's really beautiful that it's like across the country, like the Indivisible group and the others. And you can kind of plug into that and just really amplify the work that you're doing locally at a national level and share resources and ideas and things like that. That's been really cool. And it's indicative of the fact that like, yeah, maybe Trump is like stronger or more unhinged or less inhibited than he was than the first time, but we are much stronger, much
Yeah.
more organized than we ever were.
Yeah, the machinations were already there. The groups were already existing.
Yeah.
Dems here had grown. Women of Michigan Action Network was already ready to go.
Mhm.
Indivisible, nationwide organization that we're connected with, they're ready to go. And there's definitely been some pop-ups that have gotten involved, and I'm okay with that. I hope that eventually they'll see that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, and they can also
Yeah.
work with
Yeah.
those of us that have already been here. But that's okay. If they want to do their own thing, that's fine too, because we need all kinds and all players in this.
Yeah.
And there's room for all kinds of work to get done, whether we're talking uh, the more civil speeches and behaviors, or those of us that are ready to get a little more radical.
I was definitely ready yesterday to get a little more radical, but I don't know, like today how I'm feeling, but we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that you kind of mentioned when you were talking about like our kind of thought process. And just share like in my opinion, and I think this is bears out in other places, one of the things that you is important to decide on is location. That always seems to be a thing that we have to like kind of grapple with here. And it's this mix of like visibility, but also like like symbolism
Mm-hmm.
essentially, right? So like random street corner might be super visible, and yet like if you're just like protesting in front of the CVS, is it really, do
Yeah.
people understand what it is that you're doing versus like us being at the courthouse and it's a symbolic institution of
Hmm.
like checks and balances and like the importance of like the legal system and all of that. And maybe a little bit less visible. So but there's pros and cons of each. We recently there was a protest that was like right on Saginaw Street, like right as people like were exiting the expressway, essentially,
Hmm.
um, which is super, super, super visible, but not symbolic at all. So like
Yeah.
that's just something to consider. And then also just location wise, like how many people do you think you're going to have? And
Hmm.
like making sure that you're not obstructing the sidewalks and the streets, and
Hmm.
you're able to like operate within the regulations of the area that you're working
Yeah.
in is really important too.
And about the symbolic location, I mean, a lot of times when we do rallies, we call them rallies when it's this case, because we don't usually march when we do something like this, like the thing we're doing tomorrow. It's about having
Yeah.
speakers, there's electricity available, we can set up a sound system, and it's like I said, like the steps kind of create a little bit of a stage so
That's right.
people can see you. But then there's other times where Ron DeSantis came to Midland for a GOP fundraiser,
Yep.
and we had to go to where the banquet hall that it was going to be at and line the sidewalks up and down that road.
Yep.
And we had people coming. It was mostly our area, but we actually had people come all the way from Detroit to
Yep.
protest Ron DeSantis coming
Yep.
here. And so it really depends on what you're doing and where that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Where's the most symbolic
Yeah.
location for that to happen?
Yeah. And you need a really clear leadership group that is gonna be like charged with making those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That hopefully has a lot of trust, right? So that like, there isn't a whole lot of second guessing going on.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me about the decision making around like speakers and how you kind of like, because you really led that part of this
Mm-hmm.
effort for tomorrow. Like what went into all of that and kind of figuring out the speakers and how the lineup that we ended up with.
Mm-hmm. So to start with, we have kind of like a list of people in the area that we know will speak on certain issues. And we often fall back on them. But this time we really wanted to get a little bit different. We tried. We didn't get as many of the speakers as we wanted. We asked Senator Jeremy Moss, to come,
Yeah.
and we wanted him to talk about the attempt to repeal marriage equality
Hmm.
by a Michigan Republican House member. I won't say his name to give him more attention,
Hmm.
because I think that's all he really wanted out of this.
I agree.
And anyway, Senator Moss was not able to make it, although he was really disappointed. He said to keep him in
Yeah.
mind for other
Yeah.
events. But like we specifically wanted to talk about issues that were happening, and we asked Kristen McDonald-Rivet to come. She's our current Congresswoman. She was our state senator. Now she's our Congresswoman. And I believe we asked her to talk about the attacks on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, that kind of stuff. But I didn't handle that part, so I'm not sure if that message got sent over.
Those
But
details
regardless,
got passed
she
along.
always has good remarks, so
Yeah.
I'm confident in whatever she wants to talk about. And like, so for the rationale with her, she's our elected representative, and she's the person that we need to turn to, whether we're unhappy with what's going on, or we're happy with what's going on, or we have questions, or that sort of thing. So she was a logical choice. You and I are both local leaders, so we're going to be speaking. But we asked the Ingham County Clerk, Barb Byram, to come, and she is a very vocal advocate for democracy online. If you are not, I used to follow her on Twitter, but I'm not so much on there anymore. I think she also has a TikTok. I follow her there, and she probably has Instagram too. I'll have to double check, but follow her there if you don't, people. Barb Byram, because she gets feisty and she knows what she's talking about, and she will tell you, whatever silly things the Republicans like to make up about democracy, she'll set you straight. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her.
I am too. And I mean, just like who she is aside, like having somebody from the, Ingham County Clerk's office, right? So like the kind of the last stand in our democracy is like,
Mhm.
our voting rights and the importance that the clerks across the state have in that process. Uh, and then, so we have a location, we have a national kind of effort that we're plugging
Yeah.
into. We have a good symbolic location that's got some good visibility. We've got, a slate of speakers that are we're working on to get going, and we're pretty much ready for tomorrow. Um, what about getting the word out? Tell me about like how you how we go about just sort of like amplifying the fact that we're doing this.
So that is a lot of work, and I'm not
That is,
sure.
that's actually where the most work is,
It
isn't it?
really is.
Like,
I'm not sure
yeah.
everybody understands how much work I do to get the word out there. So it's usually we start a Facebook event. We used to have Mobilize, which is another service that advertises events. The Michigan Democratic Party is no longer using that service. They're signing on to a new one that I haven't got us set up on yet. But the Women of Michigan Action Network still uses Mobilize. So Allison Wilcox, who's also on the woman leadership team who we're collaborating with to plan this protest, she set that up. So Mobilize works where they put that out on their website. So if people are like looking for events in Midland or looking for events in the Tri-Cities,
Mhm.
it'll show them that. And once you've signed up for an event, it'll send you new ones, and you'll get on a list and get more information that way. With the Facebook event, it's kind of like, I set up the Facebook event, and then as the Michigan Democratic Party, I invite every single one of our followers, which they may not appreciate, but at least they know what's going on. And then I'll go into my own personal Facebook and invite everybody that I think would be interested. And then it's sharing it on pages, it's sharing it in groups. We have an email list of over 1,500 people for the Midland Democratic Party, and I know Woman has one too. I'm not sure what their numbers are, but we send out emails, and it's not just one email. Because I tell you what, sometimes people don't read
Oh
them,
yeah.
or they forget, or they're like, hey, I can't find that email. What's the information? So I send a number of emails regarding that particular thing. And we also, this time, we haven't done this before, but I think, we'll probably do it a little bit more, but it is time intensive. I made flyers and went around to message boards around town and put them up just in the hopes that,
Hmm.
somebody's going to see them.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and then there's all of those pieces, and I agree. It's like the hardest part. And also, I know that like it's not a party, so people don't have to RSVP to it. But we also like to gauge the
Yeah.
interest in all of that stuff. And one way that we do is people who are on like the Facebook, event page, and they indicate that they're going or that they're interested. And like I know from doing this work for a good number of years, like usually it's like twice as much, right? Twice as much as the
Yeah.
people who said they're coming will come, which
Yeah.
has been great. And but you also you and Laura did that sign making event over at Stranded, which is, it sounded like a really cool way to kind of get people excited about it. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we just decided, we just showed up when we advertised that as well. And that's the other thing is kind of finding ways to generate activity in your Facebook event, or whatever vehicle you use. The Facebook tends to be what we use because that's where our followers are. But it's like um creating another event inside of another event.
That's right.
and
Yeah.
and that was, making signs, and we brought foam board and markers and stickers and ideas. And we had about 15 people, and some of them just made one sign and took it home with them. And other people were like, we're going to use up every piece of foam board you have. And here they
Hmm.
are. You can give them to people at the event. And I'm like,
Hmm.
holy cow.
Yeah.
I did not expect that they were just going to sit there for 2 hours. I actually had to be like, you know what, guys? I got to go
I
pick
gotta
my
go.
kids up. If you don't mind, I need us to be done making signs, because they were just like, we are going to do this for you. And it was so awesome. And even just while we were there, some people came by and they're like, hey, is there a protest that's going to happen? And like, let me tell you about that. So, we advertised it in that way too. But that's what then got me like, oh, shoot, we should put flyers up, because there's all sorts
Right.
of people we're missing all the time
Right.
that aren't
Right.
in our circles.
Yeah, totally. So like there's
Oh,
this, go ahead.
and we sent press releases to all of the papers and news agencies and whatnot around the area too.
Yeah, leveraging the media is so important. I mean, I've come to believe that leveraging the media and like the attention you get like the day after or the couple days after is as
Mhm.
important as like whatever happens the
Yeah.
day of. And so that's super important, which brings me to like some of the nuts and bolts around like the day of organizing, right? So
Mhm.
like things that come to my mind are like assigning people to like like take pictures and do the video recording, right? We know that there's lots of recordings that happen during these events, but like
Mhm.
assigning people to have that be their job is important and is a way to engage volunteers in ways that you might not have been able to before. Well, welcome tables with, where you can get information and sign up for things. What are some of the other nuts and bolts that kind of like really have to be ironed out during for the day of the protest?
Yeah, so we are very lucky in that we have a friend that has a very nice sound system.
Mm,
And he loans it out to us every single time we have an event. Now, sometimes he's available to attend and he just operates the equipment. This particular time, he's out of town for the weekend. So we had to get some volunteers to go over and learn how to use his sound system, set it up, and they're going to bring it on Saturday and set it up and take care of all that. So there's that. There's the sound. There's little things like there's the Midland Democratic Party banner and the Women of Michigan Action Network
right.
banner. And so it's okay, how are we going to display those? Are people going to hold them? Are we going to put them on stands? Are the stands going to fall over in the wind? What do we have that'll hold them down?
Yeah.
And some of the other volunteer positions we have are just people at the welcome tables handing out handouts or getting them to sign up for our email list so they can get more information. Crowd watchers.
Hmm.
That's not something we've typically done a whole lot of, but having done these enough times, we learned this through trial and error, as you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
At first it's like, okay, it's just us organizers, and we show up, and it's like, oh shoot, we should have assigned somebody to take pictures, and okay,
Yep.
so now we've
Yep.
got that,
Yep.
and oh
Yep.
wait, we should assign somebody to watch the crowd, and then like, tell us when if anything's going wrong, just so we know and we can address it. Because when you're up there sort of on that stage, you don't always know what's
That's
happening
right.
out in the crowd. Um, Trying to think, what are some of our other? Oh, and I had people ask if they could bring water, and I'm like, well, it's not necessarily our responsibility to provide water to people, but hey, it doesn't hurt to have
Yeah.
it.
Why not? Why not? Yeah. I mean, I think it's so right what you said about what we learned trial by error and like building out this list of things that like we know now. It's very easy for us to
Mhm.
kind of get ready for this kind of thing because we've been through it so many times. And it's also why we're doing this podcast and like we're
Yeah.
writing the book that we're writing so that like we can impart that kind of wisdom that we have built through trial and error and through those like moments where we're like, shoot, I wish we had I wish we had
Uh-huh.
assigned somebody to do this thing. Um, but yeah, I think that like, the other nuts and bolts on the day really, I mean, like I think one of them is like media. So like you want to assign people to be your media point.
Hmm.
So like they are ready to they have their talking points ready for the media when the media shows up to do interviews.
Yeah.
And ideally you sign somebody to be the like media coordinator. I don't think we've done that one yet. We need to
We
find
didn't
somebody to
do
be
that
the
one this
media
time.
coordinator. Yeah. Which is a person who like finds the media person, like the newspaper reporter or the TV reporter, and connects that person with the right person who is ready to do the talking points and to talk to
Hmm.
the media. Super important and really, really great to have because if you don't have those two pieces, then the reporter is probably going to grab the first person that they see, and that person might not be ready, and that might not be like able to share the message that's the most important thing to
Hmm.
share. And so that's another thing to put on the list for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what to finish out like this whole, so you want to plan a protest chat. Um, what's on your mind for Sunday or Saturday evening? Like what happens after the protest that feels like the right things to kind of hit on kind of after action?
I don't know.
I can share some thoughts. So
Yes, you
I
start us off because I'm not sure where to go with
Yeah.
that.
So I think, again, like I said, I think that media attention that you get is as important as the event, right? And when I say
Mhm.
media, I mean like traditional media, but also social media.
Yeah.
And so like really thinking about how you amplify what you did, the messages that you shared, what you did, like if there are quotes that some of your speakers shared that you really want to like amplify, that you're like, creating kind of, some kind of collateral around those things, and that you spend some time afterwards, like amplifying what happened. So it's not just like all the work that we did to get the message out that it's going to happen. It's as important to get the message out that it did happen, that it was successful, that it was, a huge number of people, that Kristen McDonald Rivet said this and that, and isn't that awesome? And if there's newspaper articles or TV, spots that come out, to grab those links and to amplify those in social media seem to be really important, kind of after action steps for
Yeah.
sure.
And this is not really an after action step. It just got me thinking. This is like a note to protesters. If you want the news coverage to be about the protest and the message of the protest, your participation needs to be in a way that we're not making the story about the protesters. I know that doesn't quite make sense. I'll explain a little bit
Totally
more.
makes
But
sense.
if
Yeah.
there's a fight, it's no longer about the people are protesting Trump or his policies. It's there's a fight at an anti-Trump protest,
Mm-hmm.
or there was vandalism at an anti-Trump protest,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, whatever the case may be. So try not to make the story be about you. Try to make it be about the issues that you want to draw attention to.
So important. Yeah. So important. So important. Because that's what we're all there for. We're for like furthering the movement, and we're not there to, we're not there to fight with the Trump guy who walks, down the sidewalk in front of us and says, something MAGA. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what we're there for. We're never going to change that guy's mind anyway. So there's no reason to engage with that person. We're there to like hold our values and like amplify our work and our dissatisfaction with what's going on. Um, and it's got to be about that. It can't be about, a shouting match or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
And it's a lot
Super
about
important.
taking up space. This is something I've really been thinking about lately, is taking up space. And actually, I think that's kind of what my speech tomorrow is going to be about, to some extent, is just this idea of just because you know that you hold the truth in your hands, it's not enough to hold that truth. You have
Mhm.
to share it, because if you don't share it, if you don't take up space, if you don't let people know who you are and what you believe in, and then you're going like this, and you're making room for all of the other bad stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So part of this protest is taking up space and showing that this space belongs to us as much as it belongs to anybody else.
totally. Yeah, right. I mean, back to like the reason and the purpose of an event like this in the first place, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
where we started. Well, I am looking forward to the protest tomorrow. And I've got my list of things I've got to bring. And I'm going to be working on my speech probably up until the point of leaving. Do you have any final words or thoughts for folks if they're thinking about planning their own kind of protest in their areas?
I mean, and one thing, get permits. If you don't always have to have a permit.
Yeah.
When we go to the courthouse and we're using their steps and we're blocking space, that's something where we get permission to do that.
Mhm.
If you're going to protest and you're going to be on a sidewalk, I don't know if this is same in every city or if this is a Midland thing, but I think it's a Michigan thing. If you are on the sidewalks, you have every right to protest. You
Yep.
can't stand on the grass, and you
Yep.
can't necessarily take up somebody's parking lot or private property,
Yeah.
but you can stand on a sidewalk anywhere and protest. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're following the rules, and find out what the rules are in your own community.
Mhm.
Um, but don't be afraid to get out there and do it. There's some guy that's on the corner of M46 and I forget some other road, and he's just out there every day
By
protesting
himself. Yeah.
by himself.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody has privilege that, you know, he must feel that he can do it with and not be afraid, you know, whatever the case may be. But if you have a group of friends, that's always going to make it easier. And just, you know, like I said, Clare is an incredibly Republican place, and 150 people said, fuck it, I'm going out and
Yeah.
I'm going to stand there with my friends and we're just going to do it.
I
So
know.
it can
And
be
I'm
done.
sure they found more people than they ever thought that they would, even
Yeah.
in their own hometown. And it's a beautiful thing. All right. Well, Jennifer, I'll see you tomorrow on the streets.
All right.
And looking forward to it.
All right. See you there.
All right. Yep.